There's been a lot of fuss around Sonos' more compact and more affordable subwoofer, but is the Sonos Sub Mini right for your setup, or is the Sonos Sub Gen 3 still a better solution for you? Let's find out. Hey guys, Louis here, and this is a question that we've been asked non-stop since the Sub Mini's launch, and I'm going to be totally honest with you all, it's not an easy decision to make. Now, before we even try to get to the bottom of it, there is so much more to choosing the right subwoofer than just specs and technical jargon. And so in true SHS fashion, we'll be sharing our thoughts from real world testing. Now, we've been comparing the Sub Mini and the Sub Gen 3 in a variety of different setups with plenty of different content and with multiple different Sonos combinations to break down which would be a better option for your home. So let's see what we found out. Kicking things off with an RRP of $429, the Sub Mini positions itself as a little over £300 cheaper than the Sonos Sub Gen 3 at $749, and for a lot of us, this was huge. To finally have an affordable access point to add in extra bass to your Sonos setup is something we've all been crying out for. The forums don't lie, guys. We will of course cover the differences in performance, but first I want to take a closer look at the design as there are some clear variations. Because of the name Mini, I was admittedly expecting something a little smaller, but this Sub Mini is definitely more compact than the Sonos Sub Gen 3. Obviously, that's going to make it easier to position almost anywhere in your room and stay nice and discreet. For me, this sleek matte finish cylindrical design and center tunnel here immediately makes this a subwoofer that I personally would be more than happy to have on display. I think it looks really, really nice. We've then got this larger and heavier Sonos Sub Gen 3 here, which does feel maybe a little bit more dated now in comparison. Maybe it's the gloss finish, I don't know. But Sam, which do you prefer?
I prefer the matte. I think it looks more premium.
Yeah, I agree. Otherwise, they do have some similarities, including the center tunnel, but one important point worth noting is that whilst the Sub Mini must be stood vertically, the Sub Gen 3 can be positioned both vertically or horizontally. In a practical sense, this means you could hide it underneath furniture and place it right out of sight, giving you a few more options in terms of positioning in your room. Now, in my personal opinion, I prefer the overall aesthetic of the Sub Mini, and I think that it's probably compact enough that I could tuck it away in the corner of my lounge without it getting in the way. Now, I'm sure we're all well accustomed to how simple the Sonos setup process is, but if you're not a pro, don't worry, you won't struggle to figure out how to add either of these Sonos subwoofers to your home. Simply plug into power, open the app and follow the on-screen instructions, and after a few minutes, you'll be good to go. Now, you can then wirelessly connect to your chosen Sonos product or products, and I'll link a list of the compatible pairings in the description down below for you guys. Now, one thing to bear in mind, and something that might sway your decision if you have a very large space, unlike the Sub Gen 3, the Sub Mini is not able to be paired with another Sonos Sub in the same setup. So if you've got the space and the budget and really want to take your Sonos setup to the next level, you might be tempted to go for the Sub Gen 3, as you then have the option to have a dual sub setup if you'd like to. However, you are unable to do this with the Sub Mini, and before anyone asks in the comments, no, unfortunately, you cannot pair a Sub Mini with a Sub Gen 3 either. Now, we've actually done a video on a dual Sonos Sub Gen 3 setup, which I'll leave here if you guys want to check that out. When it comes to the internals, both subwoofers house two Class D digital amplifiers, which means that they are both tuned for their respective acoustic architectures. Sonos state that the Sub Mini has a pair of 6-inch woofers facing inwards here, but they don't share that information on the Sonos Sub Gen 3. Both have the same force cancelling design, which means that you're not going to get any of that cabinet buzz or rattle, and we've tested both out with a glass of water on top and they both passed our test. Both subwoofers do offer a frequency response as low as 25 Hz, and although Sonos haven't stated the amplification, based on our experiences and physics alone, it's pretty safe to assume that the Sub Gen 3 is the more powerful unit of the pair. Now here's the bit you've all been waiting for, sound performance. Now, as with everything, there's no right or wrong here. They both offer exceptional bass performance when applied to the right environment and will enhance your audio setup in more ways than just one. Now, we just want to make sure that you make the right decision to maximize performance in your specific setup and space. So just a quick disclaimer, as always, guys, what you're about to hear on YouTube is slightly different to what we're going to be hearing here in the studio. But we've picked a different trailer this time. We've got the Mandalorian trailer on. So we've got a little bit of music, we've got some vocals, we've also got some explosions. So hopefully this will give you a good indication as to how these different combinations of setup sound.
Dad was the only Mandalorian.
Alright, kid. Hang on. You ready for an adventure?
I think your dad was the only Mandalorian.
Alright, kid. Hang on. You ready for an adventure?
I think your dad was the only Mandalorian.
Alright, kid. Hang on. You ready for an adventure?
In terms of the Sub Mini, after testing it, we were really impressed with its impact on low-end performance. For a unit of its size, the Sub Mini surprisingly offered really clean and tight bass without feeling excessive, and it copes really well with variations in loudness and frequency changes. So hats off to Sonos for that. The fact that it's a sealed enclosure too helps to ensure they're really maximising performance from the size of the unit. For us, we found that the Sub Mini worked exceptionally well when paired with either the Sonos Beam and Sonos Ray, but we'll touch a little bit more on that later. On the flip side, as expected, the Sonos Sub Gen 3 is the more powerful unit of the pair. It offers a much deeper and more impactful bass that really excelled when listening at higher volumes and in larger spaces. Honestly, when I was watching Top Gun Maverick, I could really feel the step up in overall bass performance, and that really added to the overall level of immersion. It's clear that you are going to get a little bit more oomph if you opt to go for the Sub Gen 3 over the Sub Mini, but the question that I put to you guys is, do you really need that? When it comes to making a decision, there's two obvious things you need to ask yourself. Number one, how big is your space? And number two, what are you looking to pair the subwoofer with? If it's space you're unsure about, well, we'll keep it really simple. If you've got a large space and want room-filling, cinematic bass and have the budget to match, it's a no-brainer. Get your hands on a Sonos Sub Gen 3. But sadly for a lot of us, that's not our reality. If you've got a smaller or medium-sized room, I would question the need for something as powerful as the Sub Gen 3, which could be deemed as overkill. What you gain in bass enhancement from the Sub Mini, in my opinion, is more than enough for our smaller Sonos Lounge, for example. As for ideal pairings, this is where lines get a little bit blurred. Firstly, it's important to note that adding a Sonos subwoofer does more for your setup than just add bass. Where the connected sub takes the lower frequencies off your soundbar, for example, it then frees it up to focus more on the other arrays for an enhanced overall performance. Following our testing, when we paired the Sub Mini with the Sonos Ray and Beam, the results were exceptional. The enhancement that the Sub Mini offered to the Beam Gen 2 especially was massive. We think the Beam is a great soundbar in its own right, but when paired with the Sub Mini, vocals sounded much more pronounced and the mid-range really stepped up a level. It felt as if it added more life to the Beam, making it a killer combo for me. So for those of you already with a Beam or Ray at home, I'd seriously consider the Sub Mini as the option for you. Adding a Sub Gen 3 is still an option with these, more so with the Beam than the Ray maybe, but again, it comes back to how much power you want and the space that you have. Sonos Arc fans, don't worry, I haven't forgot about you. As the premium soundbar in the range, it naturally offers a much more expansive listening experience when used on its own. And this is where the Sub Mini falls slightly short and fails to offer the same overall impact as the Sub Gen 3. Now, needless to say, as the more powerful sub, we saw this coming. That's not to say that you shouldn't pair a Sub Mini with an Arc, because it does add more detail to the overall performance, and in a more compact room might be all the boost that you need. But in a slightly larger space, we felt that the Arc needed a companion with a little bit more oomph in the low end, which could match the sound performance and soundstage of the Arc. In terms of pairing with Sonos Ones, SLs or Sonos 5s, Things aren't exactly black and white either. But as a general rule of thumb, pairing the Sub Mini with a pair of 1s or 1SLs does offer great bass and improve the overall stereo imaging, making this our suggested combination. With 5s on the other hand, our experience was pretty similar to what we found with the Arc. The Sub Gen 3 pushed the 5s to a higher level and offered a more noticeable bass output. Now, we've covered our ideal pairings a little bit more in our Sub Mini versus Sub Gen 3 blog, so if we haven't quite addressed everything you want to know, then make sure you head over there using the link in the description below. When it comes to the Sub Mini versus Sub Gen 3 debate, I think we really need to be aware that although the Sub Mini has been marketed as the baby brother of the Sub Gen 3, it really isn't just the same piece of tech in a smaller cylindrical package. In fact, the Sub Mini is its own standalone product that, despite not being as powerful as the Sub Gen 3, does hold a lot of new and innovative technology that is specifically calibrated for its unique design, which is how it can offer a great performance with its compact size. That's not to say that it's better or worse than the Sub Gen 3, it's just newer. 2 years newer to be precise, and with all new products you're bound to experience some kind of future-proofing benefits. There's absolutely no doubt that we've got two exceptional subwoofer options here. We're confident that whichever sub you choose to invest in, you won't be disappointed in terms of value for money. In the Sub Mini's case, if you were to spend the comparable $429 on a standard subwoofer, you could probably go out and get yourself a better specifications list, but with the benefits of improving your other Sonos products, design and overall experience, the Sub Mini does feel like good value for money. Whilst on the other hand, the Sonos Sub Gen 3 also feels like good value for money and is the better subwoofer when compared purely by power. But Louis, is it £300 better, I can hear you ask? Well, based on our experiences with the Sub Gen 3, it does take impactful bass to the next level when listening at higher volumes and in larger spaces, which is something that the Sub Mini just can't compete with. So if you've got a big room, have an Arc already, want room-filling cinematic bass and have the budget, then I'd argue yes, it's no question that the Sub Gen 3 is right for you. And for those of you who've seen the comments about Sonos supposedly downgrading the performance of the Sub Gen 3 because the Sub Mini was on the way, rest assured, the 14.18 update has put any conspiracies to bed, and let's be honest, the Sub Gen 3 is a very popular long-standing Sonos product, and from a brand's perspective, Sonos want to sell more Sub Gen 3s. It's a more expensive product. The beauty of the Sub Mini is it gives us options. You just have to cast your mind back to a couple of months ago when the Sub Gen 3 was the only Sonos subwoofer, and so this means more Sonos users should now be able to access a step up for their system. Sonos has provided us with an opportunity to choose what sort of bass output we want to add to our setup and at which price point, and in my book, that can only ever be a good thing. But what do you guys think? Hopefully this video has helped you get a little bit closer to making your decision, but if you're local and you don't just want to take my word for it, then why not visit our showroom and hear them both for yourself? If we're too far away, then we do also offer a 30-day returns policy, so if you're on the fence, why not try it out at home? Comment down below which setup you think is right for you and why. I'm sure it'll help those in the community who are still a little bit unsure. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll catch you all in the next video.